Hi everyone and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. Today I'm really happy to be joined by Leah Paulos, who is the founder and the director of publicity for Press Shop PR and the book Publicity School. So thank you for joining us, Leah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, tell us a bit about your background, because I know you've worked with a lot of famous books and a lot of great books. So tell us a bit about your background and what led you into doing publicity.
Yeah, so I am one of the rare independent book publicists who did not come up and get their initial experience in publishing.
Yep.
So I actually have never worked in a publishing house. I rather came from journalism. I was a writer and magazine editor for the first years of my career. And that honestly was the best training of all for doing publicity, because it is, I was on the other end of the work that we do now. I was the one receiving pitches. I was the one figuring out what we wanted to cover, how we wanted to cover it, how to make a story out of something that people pitched us. And that's really what we do when you're doing book publicity. That's really what you're doing. Right. You're figuring out how to position a book so that a journalist can write about it, so that they can make a story out of it really easily.
Yeah. So publicity and PR, for people who've never heard, are they the same thing?
Yeah, pretty much. For publishing, it's generally referred to as publicity, but people use them pretty interchangeably.
Yeah. So the main aim of your job as a publicist is to get people who have got books, get authors and writers to, get their books more famous, but more people seeing them. Is that sort of summary of it all?
Yeah. I mean, it is really about figuring out how to get a book out to its audiences through earned media. So it's not through advertising, which is paid media. It's by positioning it in such a way that journalists or influencers or anybody that has an audience that they can speak to, figuring out how to present the book to them in such a way that they'll cover it, and then the book gets exposure in front of their audience.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you just said earned media. So what is earned media? What does that mean?
Media is different than paid media. Paid media is advertising. If you want to completely control the message and you want it to be a sure thing, you can pay for it. That's what advertising is. Publicity is different. It is, you have to sort of sell the ideas on their merits. So you have to get people to want to write about it. We don't ever work in any sort of pay for play type environment at Press Shop. It's really about making people interested organically and wanting to cover it because it's an interesting story and because their audience that they've cultivated, their listeners, whoever it is, will find it interesting.
Yeah, amazing. Now, with Press Shop PR, obviously you just mentioned you've got your background in journalism, which makes you stand out slightly to the other publicists in the industry because you've been on the receiving end of this publicity. So I guess your advantage is how that other aspect works. Is that what made you found Press Shop PR in the first place?
Yeah. So, I mean, I loved being a journalist. I did it for several years. I think for me, the impetus for changing over was a couple things. I mean, one was I worked at Condé Nast, which was at Times Square, and I commuted to Times Square in New York every single day. And I finally, after a couple years, I was like, I do not want to do this anymore. I don't like commuting to Times Square every day and sitting in a cubicle. So that was the thing I would say that just led me to the immediate thing to get out of journalism. And then I sort of thought, all right, well, what should I do instead? I was doing a lot of freelance writing. So that was still journalism, but on a freelance basis. And then from there, I kind of pivoted to working with people who, I just found that whenever I told people that I worked in magazines, they were always asking me, how do you get into these magazines? Especially when I was doing copywriting for various companies, they were like, "Oh, you worked at Condé Nast. Like, I would love to be featured in these magazines. How do we do it?" So I was always talking to people about that, and it's the kind of thing when you work in a certain space, you things seem obvious to you, and
Yeah.
then you get out of it and you realize, oh, wait, this is not so obvious to everybody who's not in this space. So that was sort of how I moved into publicity. Is I just it was sort of an organic consulting with various people about how to put themselves in front of editors that could potentially cover them. And then my first book client was kind of random. He was married to somebody I was working with on some copywriting for her company. And that was my first entree into publishing. And I just ran with it. I mean, I've always loved books and writing. And so as soon as I started working with him, his name was Frank Delaney. He was from Ireland. He had a big bestseller called Ireland. And then I worked with him on multiple books. And, from there, I just built the business out of that and really realized that there's a huge need, especially the way publishing has been changing and the media world has been changing. It's really left authors in this position of not having enough promotional support from the publishing companies. So it really left this opening for authors, a service that authors really needed. They worked really hard on this book. They, pour their heart and soul into it. And then it comes out, and the publishing company, for all sorts of reasons, business reasons, because the media industry has just changed so quickly, and publishing doesn't tend to change quite as quickly as anything else. It sort of created this space where authors really needed extra support. So that was sort of why I founded Press Shop PR. And we have been doing it ever since.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of authors don't really come from a business background often. So concepts such as publicity and the marketing are quite unusual for them. They're quite artistic, creative people. So coming to an expert like you is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's clear you've worked with quite a diverse range of authors, and you started with Frank Delaney. So let's hear about some of the authors that you have worked with and hear some of the case studies about what you've done with them to make them successful.
Yeah. So we've worked with probably close to 350 authors now. We're a team of 5, and we've been around for a while at this point. So it's been a really big range. We have the really big, the number one bestsellers that we've worked on, the books like March, which is behind me here on my wall. For anyone who can see on video, which, won a National Book Award, was a huge bestseller. We worked on Tyranny by Tim Snyder, which also was a number one bestseller right after the 2016 election here in the US. So we've worked on a number of really big books like that with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And then we also work on books that are, debut novels from small independent presses, or a short story collection, or, a academic book where the author doesn't have much of a name, but they want to break out to be, break out of their particular academic niche. So it really runs the gamut, and it's different from book to book. Obviously, when we are promoting a book with a really big name like Neil deGrasse Tyson, it's a different story. We don't have to sell Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's rather how to strategically figure out, okay, what is going to be the most impactful for this book? What can we want to get a late night show. We want to get a morning show. We want to get this. So which are the ones that we're going to try? And we try to put all those pieces together. So that's a really different way of working than when we're working with an author whose name doesn't mean anything to the people that we're going to be pitching, and they're not known. Then it's really about, putting their story forward, figuring out the most compelling possible way of positioning their work, making sure that journalists understand how this is new, why they should cover it. If it's nonfiction, how it's pushing the narrative forward on a particular topic. And also, one of the key things we do with books that are, well, with all books really, but it's so important for a campaign these days is, media is so incredibly fractured now. Everybody has their own feeds. They have their, podcast queue. They have the Substacks they subscribe to. There's all sorts of ways that people are getting their own information. And so, you really need to figure out the different audiences and where they are getting their information. So, and you want to figure out the different, like a couple different spaces. So just, as an example, we worked on a book. It was a memoir called A Place Called Home. It was a memoir about a man. It was a man's story. His name is David Ambrose. He grew up in foster care, had a terrible childhood. So it's a lot about his childhood, and now he's a successful guy. He works at Amazon. He's an executive at Amazon. He has his own foster son. So for a book like that, we wanted to think, how are we going to how are we going to promote the book to all the different audiences? So you want to think in this case, it's not just that it's a memoir. Memoirs can be really hard to promote. But we saw when we started working on this book that, there's the people that are going to be interested in it from, they're interested in foster care. They're interested in child poverty. We can go into that category and get a lot of coverage. We can also pick up the people who do cover a memoir. He's a gay guy, so we pitched into gay media as well and got a lot of coverage there. He also is, like I said, an executive at Amazon. So there was sort of a business story and a really sort of a lifestyle story, kind of a feel-good story. I mean, he's a great personality. He's done really well in his life. So we could pitch it into that space as well. So that's one example that, every author can think about is, what are the different ways that you can position your book, the different audiences, and make sure to, get yourself noticed, get in front of the people that have those different audiences, so that it can sort of be part of a well-rounded campaign.
So it sounds like even depending on different books and different authors, you have a different strategy for how you would publicize a book. So it would be different for, as you mentioned, someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I'm guessing you're going to try and get him on famous TV shows, whereas with someone who's self-published their first book, they need to think about different ways they're going to get publicity for their book, because obviously it's going to be on a much smaller scale. So for people who are maybe just starting out and are finding the idea of publicity quite overwhelming, what would be the first steps do you think they could do in order to understand where the channels would be best for them to try and get publicity in the first place?
Yeah. So one of the things, and I recommend this in all of our book publicity school workshops, is to get started, to get out of this space that authors often find themselves in, which is, I know I have to do a lot. I know I want to get my book out to all these people. I see this happening with other books, and I just don't know how to do it. And you're Googling around and getting so much advice from podcasts and, various places. That feeling of overwhelm and just not knowing what sort of a paralyzation. One of the best ways to get over that is to come up with some books that are somewhat similar to your book, that have come out in the past year or two or three at the most. And, just really map out exactly where they've been covered. If it's a book that has somewhat similar audience, get out a spreadsheet and just map it out. What did this person do? What happened? Did they get a trade review? Did they get a feature in their local paper? Do they have a big Substack? Did they speak on, 6 different podcasts? Did they do a local bookstore event? Whatever it is, just actually map that out for as many books as you can find that fit that description, which is they did well, they came out in the past couple of years, and they are roughly in the same space, or at least there's some element of similarity. It doesn't. So, for example, that book I was just mentioning, that could be used as if someone wrote another book about foster care, that could be used as a comp title for this kind of research. Then you would kind of ignore the parts that don't relate to your book. Like if the elements of the business and entrepreneurship that we pitched because of his career, you ignore that but look for the overlap and get what you can there. That's a really great way to get started for a number of reasons. One, it takes it out of that really abstract, kind of overwhelming thing where it just feels like I have no idea where to start. This is a crazy world.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? It gives you like, okay, this is exactly what you do. It's right here. And then it also gives you specific things that you can pitch. You can say like, oh, look, that podcast, I've never heard of that podcast, but looking at it, they've got, however many social media reviews. It looks like it has a dedicated audience. And it looks like a good audience for my book. I'm going to add that to my list and try to reach out to that show about my book. So I think that's always just a great way to start for anyone, but particularly for authors that are feeling a bit overwhelmed and stressed out.
I know that strategy works for reaching out to podcasts, because that's exactly how we got in touch in the first place. You got in touch with me. Yeah. So there's living proof that getting in touch with the right audience people can work.
Here we are. This is exactly a case study in making this happen.
So when you're working with, let's think about maybe what you just said about finding the competition. When you're working with a new book author that you're working with, is that the first step that you do as well? You'd find the competition, understand what they're doing, so that you can maybe map out a kind of, is it maybe mapping out an audience profile?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that we've been doing this for a long time, so we don't fully map it out because in that same way, because we don't need it to serve all of those same purposes. Like we know what a general campaign will look like. Where we do it is in finding the other outlets. So if we find a book, and then we'll look and see what are all the shows, who are the journalists that reviewed them, who mentioned them on Substack. So we absolutely do that for our books. It's really necessary now. I mean, even though we've been doing this for so long and we've got, so many contacts, people we've worked with, you have to be doing it now because everything's changing. It's changing so incredibly quickly. I think the rate of change has been quite high for many years now, but it's accelerating even more. So you have to be nimble. We can't rely on, we did a book like this a year and a half ago, let's just go to the same people. We absolutely will go to those project documents that we have and pull out the contacts, but it's not enough because, some of them aren't around anymore. Others, there's a whole new crop. Maybe this guy had a podcast and now he is like, all right, forget that podcast. I actually prefer a YouTube show and have a new producer. So you just there's no substitute for getting down in the weeds and doing that real-time research. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we do a lot of looking into comp titles all around.
Yeah. When you're doing publicity for the first time, are you thinking about trying to aim for more specific publications to get featured in, or is it better to go wide to get that more general publicity, or does it really just depend on the book?
No, it depends on the book. I'd say that the way we think of it now is that people are getting their information from so many different sources. And so you really want to be in a lot of different places, because if you are like, I don't really like interviews, I'm going to really try to maybe place an op-ed and an essay and hopefully I'll get reviewed and I can do a written Q&A. Like, okay, great. But then you're missing out on all of the interview opportunities from podcasts and radio. So, you just want to make sure that you are in you're showing up in a lot of different media formats, as well as in different audience spaces. So, the general ones can be fantastic in that, some books have more of a general audience appeal. So you can go for, here in the States, like NPR, that's sort of more less focused in general venue. But then also, that doesn't mean that because you're going to go for that, that doesn't mean you should bypass those niche targeted outlets where maybe it's not huge. Maybe they have, 500 downloads an episode or something for a podcast, not big. But if that's 500 people that are exactly the kind of readers you want to reach, great, go for it. If you think about the book tour, the traditional book tour that used to be a staple of publicity campaigns, that was, publishers would send authors to, independent bookstores. They often fly them there, put them up in a hotel. And even a successful one would be, maybe 50 people there. And, if you think about numbers, even a small podcast is, you're reaching more people. Obviously, there are other benefits to reading in a bookstore, and you're part of the literary community. You're talking in real life to people. The bookstores then can hand sell your book. So I'm not saying that there's no benefit and that there's no value in that. There is quite a bit of value, but just in terms of authors who sometimes are like, oh, I've never heard of that podcast. Does anyone listen to it? Is it really worth doing? I would err on the side of yes, which, again, there's all sorts of podcasts that are, complete cranks and there's no barrier to entry. So I'm not saying you shouldn't vet it, but, if it's on the smaller side and you haven't heard of it, that doesn't mean it's not a worthwhile thing for you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I'm getting, I have to, a lot of people ask me if they can come on the podcast, and I have to make sure that it's all really people that are speaking to the target audience I have. Because, yeah, as you mentioned, there are some smaller podcasts that whilst they have a smaller audience, all the people listening are interested in self-publishing books and, learning how to make more sales to their books. So it can be super relevant to get onto the right places.
Yeah, definitely.
So we talked about 2 steps to the publicity process. So firstly, you've obviously got looking at what your your competition is doing and working out where they're getting shown. Then you're looking at the outlets that they're getting shown in and whether they would be taking on people as well. The third part is, I guess, outreaching to them and making sure that you get accepted onto their shows, into their magazine or whatever their media is. So when you're contacting journalists, people who own these sorts of businesses, what are the main mistakes you need to avoid?
Yeah. So I could talk on and on about that.
I should share your pitch in the show notes so that people can see what a good pitch looks like.
Yeah. So, you want to think when you have a book, you first of all need to think about, or you have to disabuse yourself of the idea that you need to present the entirety of your book in this pitch. Yep. You as the author are going to know all of the ins and outs of this book, the breadth and the nuance. You do not need to put that into a pitch email. The pitch email should be pretty short, to the point, and have a specific ask. So, you want to think about what is the purpose of this pitch letter. It is to get someone to request the book and read it, and then in the hopes that they will consider the ask. The ask being, will you have me on your show? Can I send you a copy for a review? So that's the purpose. Mm-hmm. And then you have to think about also that, how is it landing? What you are landing in an inbox that is most likely overflowing to somebody that is very, very busy. They do not want to be hit by a massive wall of text where they have to read to the 3rd paragraph to even understand what your book is about. They need to understand it really, really quickly. The first couple sentences should be like, bam, that's your hook. That's the story. You need to give journalists, if you want them to cover your book, you need to give them a way for them to cover your book, which means a story. They don't cover books. They're not there to say, oh, Judy wrote a book. Who cares? They want to know what Judy's book has to offer that their readers and their listeners or their audience is going to find interesting and valuable. So you have to give that to them in your pitch. So, that's one thing. The other thing is you want to make sure to, at the same time, make sure that the bare bones facts are there. That's one thing that people forget all the time. They just, send a thing and forget to say, like, when did this book come out? Who's publishing it? All of those things. But, you want to keep in mind that anytime you are writing a pitch to someone, you are considering the person and considering what they need. Journalists need stories. Journalists need something new. They don't want to do a retread of something that they've heard 10,000 times. And they need the actual information. They need the facts, and they need to know that it's sort of that they can trust it. So that's, if it's traditionally published, great. That is a shorthand for a journalist to know, okay, like, this has been vetted by editors. It's gone through this professional process. The publisher is behind it. That's a shorthand for, like, okay, you can skip that step. When you are approaching a journalist about a self-published book, you don't have that. So you do need to find other ways to show your credibility to them very quickly.
Okay.
So whether that's your website or your institutional affiliation or your track record doing this or your speaking engagements, whatever it is, you have to know that when you're reaching out, if you don't have a traditional publisher behind you, that is part of your job. That's what a journalist is going to need to cover you, because they're busy. They don't have time to be like going down a rabbit hole to be investigating, your sources, or, you need to make that really clear to them.
Right. Okay. So could you give an example of what that might look like? So would it be, say, for example, if you've got a big Instagram account, it could be that, or would it be something different?
For someone who's self-published, you mean?
Yes, self-published, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can be, including a big social media account, whatever. Say you have spoken at, this place, that place, and those names have some recognition. Ideally, you would have a really professional looking website as well, so that you can direct people there as well. And on your website, you want to keep that in mind as well, that you are not only talking to potential readers in your website, you are also making the case to journalists that you are a reputable source, that you're going to give them a great story, that you're trustworthy. And if they are going to consider interviewing you, that you're going to be a good interview. Plenty of people can write a good book and then they get on an interview and then they just don't explain it very well, or, whatever reason, they're not great. So, you want to make all of that really clear to the journalist. But, other things it can look like is if you've had other books that have been published, if you have blurbs from people that are, putting their reputation sort of on the line. If there's a blurb by somebody who has a reputation and they've taken upon themselves to, like, yes, I stand by this book, I support it, that's one thing. So, you just have to figure out the other sort of ways that you can have some credibility. Also, other media attention that you've gotten is also really helpful in that regard.
Right. Okay. So actually in the email, you could say, I've appeared in this magazine, I've appeared in this blog, whatever.
Yeah. So you don't want to, depending on which place you are going to and how it corresponds to the ones that you've already appeared in, you don't necessarily want to put all of them in. But if you have been featured in a prominent newspaper, or, a legitimate journalist has written a piece on you, that's an incredibly useful thing for you to include, because that gives you credibility. They assume, like, okay, this journalist looked into it. They presumably had a fact checker check on it. So yeah, you want to put in a few things like that. You also might want to put in, a clip from an interview, so that if you're reaching out for other interviews, they can listen and make sure that you sound good.
Yeah, good. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Now, you've obviously got loads of experience about this, which is why I'm guessing you created Book Publicity School in the first place. So what was it that inspired you to create the program? And give us a bit of an overview about what authors can learn, and the
Yeah.
main aim of the program would be.
Yeah. So the reason we launched Book Publicity School was, in this environment, publishers require authors to do so much work. Like, that is a part of the publishing process now. Agents look for that this author is going to bring, promotional mindset when they decide if they're going to take an author on. And when the agent pitches a publisher, they also want to see that. They want to see that the author is going to be engaged and promote the book, and that the people at the publishing houses know that they don't have the resources that they once did and that they wish they still did. They don't have those. So they do require authors to take on a lot of that promotional work. And then authors are like, well, I'm an author. I'm not a publicist. I'm not a marketer. I don't know how to do that. So that is really why we started Book Publicity School, was to educate authors in what they can do, how they can navigate these spaces. I mean, basically promoting your book with publicity is asking an author to navigate the space between the publishing world and the media world effectively. And the media world is really fast moving, very quickly changing. It has its own protocols. You kind of have to understand it. Publishing is also a sort of opaque world. It's, a little intimidating. You're unclear who you should ask about things. So authors are tasked with navigating between these, sort of opaque, sort of intimidating, mysterious worlds, and to do it really well to support their book, their baby that they've been working on for however long. So it's hard to do that when you don't understand those spaces. So that was what we wanted to do, is share all of the, insights that we have from working on the front lines at Press Shop, doing, five of us publicists doing book publicity campaigns every day. We wanted to share what we've learned that authors can implement for their own campaigns, for their own book promotion. So we do it in the form of workshops and coaching. We've got a whole bunch of different programs that we work with authors on. We've got a couple crash courses, which really just drill down into some of the specifics that are needed for every campaign. So how to create that pitch. What do you say in the pitch, like we talked about? What are the formats? What is the information? What should it look like? We do also one about building your media outreach list. So how do you, what does that actually mean to build that list? What do you do? How do you sit down to your computer, and how do you start? Where do you go? What do you need? So that's another one. We do another one on author platform building. And then another one on post-publication promotion. So we have those 4 one-off classes. We have a 6-week program as well that includes all of that information, plus some other topics like op-eds and excerpts, and making yourself into an expert and pitching yourself as an expert, how to work with your publishing, whoever is assigned to you at the publishing house. And then we also have a Facebook group where we actually give people feedback on their pitches. So they'll put in a pitch, and we're like, well, you know what, this sentence is really interesting, but that's the 7th sentence. I really had no idea what you were talking about until then. We're very nice about it, but we also, we're straightforward. If I read a pitch and I'm like, I actually have no idea what this book is about, that's not good. You need to start at this point and go rework it. We do a lot of that in the 6-week program. And then we also work in a 6-month program where we work with people on a longer term basis. So all of those workshops are included, but then they also are getting one-on-one support from me and my team.
Yeah. So with the 6-week program, it sounds like it's quite step by step, where it takes you from just taking a book and working out what your strategy is going to be and then how to implement it.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, we call it the intensive, and it's intensive. I mean, it's in that it is a real primer for people who need to get up and running. They don't really understand the process, and they want to know all of the different elements that they will get them from, this point to closer to publication. We, because I mentioned this before, that one problem for authors in this space is that there's a glut of information in some ways. So one thing we really do in the 6 week and all of our classes is we make sure to keep them on the smaller side so that we can give custom advice. So, not everything we say is going to be relevant for each person. So I can say like, hey, Teddy, this thing I'm going to talk about right now, it's not really for you. We're going to get to this other thing and that's going to be for you. And Margaret, you could ignore that and listen to this one. So we do try to point authors to the specific elements that are going to be really worthwhile for them.
Yeah. And so by the end of the 6 weeks, what would people who have taken that intensive course, what would their outcome be?
Yeah. So we always want people to have a pitch by the time the course is ready, over, that we've looked at, we've given feedback. We always do it. We suggest a Q&A, that they do a Q&A as well as part of their pitch materials. So we want them to have that ready to go. And then also the start of their media list. In general, a media list should be a living, breathing document. We are never finished with our media lists because there are so many places to go in this environment. But we want the authors to have both of those two key pillars of any campaign, the pitch materials and the media list. We want them to have, a decent start at both of them by the time the course is over.
Brilliant. So it's like by the end of the 6 weeks, you have got everything you need to do and also the strategy to start getting that publicity and start moving forward.
Yes, strategy and sort of a roadmap. People come out of that 6 week workshop saying that they have, a roadmap, a schedule with, to-dos on a specific, with a time frame built in so that they can sort of go forth and execute rather than flailing around trying to figure out, where to start and what to do.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks so much. It's been a great overview of exactly what publicity is and how the book publicity school exactly works and what people can expect to get from the end of it. Have you got any advice for people who are maybe a bit intimidated by the idea of self-promotion? A lot of people would get quite worried by emailing these huge brands like Condé Nast or something like that. So, give me some encouragement for the people who are worried about it.
Yeah. So I would say that it's just the way the world is now. Every author just needs to do it. And, I think you just have to get out of that mindset of feeling uncomfortable about it and think about an imaginary friend of yours who's very creative and talented, who, came up with, some new multimedia exhibition or, put in their, paint, has an amazing gallery exhibit of their artwork. And they said, oh, I am so excited about this. I've been working on it for so long, but no one's coming and I hate promoting myself. You'd be like, well, you have to, there's no, you have to let people know you've done all of this work. You owe it to the work to tell people about it. So, kind of stepping back and, I say the same thing to authors, it's you are putting this out into the world because you think it's valuable, and you're doing a disservice to your work if you're not going to let people know. The other thing is a slight reframe is that you're not promoting yourself, you're promoting your book. You think this is valuable, so you are going to tell people about it. It doesn't have to be me. It's your book. Yeah. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say, if people are intimidated about, say there's a podcast that they love and they think they would be great on it, but then it's just it's hard to press send. Is this okay? Just send it. Like, what is the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Like, what is the worst that can happen? They can ignore you. They can say it's not a good fit. Okay. Then you're right back where you started, which is not being on the show.
Yeah. I'd say don't worry about them ignoring you, because think about how many emails you ignore yourself. And
Totally. Yeah. No, you cannot take a non-response from an email personally. I mean, I would be just a shell of a human being if I did that as a publicist. I mean, as a publicist, you have to learn that there are a million reasons why someone doesn't respond to your email. It may have been buried in other emails. Maybe they're on maternity leave. Maybe they're just working on a different big story. There are so many reasons, and just do not take it personally. That's so important for authors, because it's hard. When we're working on a book, we have that professional space. We didn't write the book. We're promoting it. We care about it, but it can be harder for authors because it feels personal. Like, oh my God, why doesn't anyone want to write me back about my book? But you just have to, just really try to tamp down on that tendency. Yeah,
definitely. Well, brilliant. I mean, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think it's been a great overview of how publicity works. And, I really would recommend people looking at the book publicity school. There's so much to learn. It's a step-by-step program exactly for how you can start doing a publicity and become an expert in it in a really short amount of time, and you're handheld along the whole way. So it's a really great program. So thanks so much for sharing with that.
You are welcome. And I completely should have told you before that we also have a free monthly class at Book Publicity School. So if anyone wants to check it out, they can check out the free class. It's called the 101, and it's right on the homepage.
Oh, even better. Everyone loves a bit of a freebie. So thank you very much for that as well. So if people want to find you, where's the best place to do that? Not physically, I mean, like online, obviously.
In my office in Brooklyn. So they can find the two websites are Press Shop PR. So press a button, shop PR, 3 S's, 2 P's in a row. I always have to tell people that. Bookpublicityschool.com is a little more straightforward. And then we are also on LinkedIn and Blue Sky, and that's just under my name. Also on Facebook, if you look up Press Shop or Book Publicity School. And we are on X, although we are moving away from it.
Right. Good. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance Podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1. Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance Podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.